evening, everyone. Those of you who are in the Sierra Pacific Synod and from wherever you are watching this live stream from, today is the very first day of Pastor Amanda being an assistant to the bishop here in the Sierra Pacific Synod. And I called you Amanda. I'm sorry. It's Manda. And here's how we identify, if you want to know. I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and to know about where you have come from and how you made it into this space, what you were excited about in our synod. If you all have questions, Amanda's going to answer them or at least respond to them. So feel free to lift up any questions or comments that you might have. Amanda, will you start this off by telling folk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I grew up in the heart of Lutheran country in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I went to Nativity Lutheran Church in St. Anthony, Minnesota. And yeah, grew up there as a place of love and belonging for myself and my family. And it was just a part of our identity, what we did. I felt so loved there that I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went away from home and struck out on my own, but I knew that I wanted to see as much of the world as possible and that I always felt like I belonged in church. So I went to an ELCA college. I studied religion, but I was adamant that I was never going to go to seminary. I spent some time bopping around in a bunch of different ELCA ministries, including some of my favorites like Urban Serving Corps in Denver, Colorado. Highly recommend that you check them out if you haven't. But also, in all of that searching, there were people whom I identified with, I connected with, and with their encouragement and their identification of a call that they saw in me, I ended up going to seminary a little bit out of reluctance and a little bit because I just didn't know what else to do, and people my age weren't getting jobs after a certain time. So I went to seminary, and it was the most formative, heartbreaking, life-giving 4 years of my life, and really solidified a call to, or solidified a reason that God called me into the world and a purpose. So I'm blessed to have been assigned to the synod sometime after seminary. Unfortunately, every time I leave school, the economy is crap. It's just hard to get work no matter what you're doing. But I've been blessed to serve a couple of congregations in this synod, and then also now to serve the synod itself. And I'm really, really excited. Yeah, I think that's my faith story in a nutshell. There's, way too much to talk or to tell, but that's who I am. Oh, Bishop Megan, I can't hear you. Oh, can anybody else hear Bishop Megan? Is it just me?
Oh, sorry. I forgot to unmute.
That's okay.
This is just how we live, right? I just wanted to let you know that people are excited that you are an assistant to the bishop and that they are sending out lots of love for you. And
that's so sweet. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. Would you be willing to tell people what you understand your role to be as this assistant to the bishop?
Yeah. Specifically in this staff, in serving this synod with this bishop, I think one of the things that I'm excited to do is put my love for administration and meetings to use. I really, honestly, I know most people don't like meetings, but y'all, that is the room where it happens. I shouldn't quote Hamilton. I don't love it that much, but it is. It's a really good line. I love being in meetings where people struggle with decisions and make covenants and plan and hope and dream for future church. So my understanding is that I am called to roles of strategic organizing and leadership for our synod. That means I'll be working with people and congregations in the mobility process. So in the process of congregations and clergy and deacons all finding new relationships with one another. Also in the candidacy process for those who are seeking professional vocations in the church, I hope that expands beyond our rostered leaders and into a bunch of different professionals in our congregations. Whatever we can do to build up and support and empower people in multiple vocations. Church secretaries are my favorite people, but I also think that church secretaries have been undervalued and underused. So I want to help us grow those roles and capacities in our congregation and imagine them in new ways. And then for all the strategic planning and organizing, which right now, today on my first day, just includes, like getting my computer set up, but also hopefully will extend to supporting our new communications director, our other A2B, our DEM, and everyone about how we can make our work with each other. And I don't just mean staff and the Synod Council, but between congregations and individuals, how we can make that work as collaborative as possible. Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing, and I hope that that's what is helpful.
Yeah, not everyone knows what mobility is. Would you be willing to kind of describe what that means for congregation, like what the steps are in that process? Not everyone knows that it's described in their constitution or like what happens next. And
it is, yeah. I mean, most people, I think, who are lay folk in congregations, you come to a point where your pastor's like, hey, I'm moving on, or I'm leaving, or I'm retiring, or whatever. And all of a sudden you go, oh, crap, now what? Because you don't think about those things most of the time, as you shouldn't have to. But when a pastor leaves the congregation, often people in congregations need some help figuring out how to transition to the next pastor or what to do now. And that's part of what we call mobility. How to have leaders in your congregation, usually by that we mean paid staff in your congregation who can help your community and your worshiping community do the ministry that they're called to do, whatever that might be. So that includes finding deacons and pastors to serve in congregations. I hope that in the near future, it can also be support for youth ministers and parachurch ministers, administrators, communications directors. I don't even know what all the possibilities are, but I'm sure there's, music directors, musicians, however we can help do that. I hope that that's what the Synod is able to help to do. And in our constitutions, that's what it says our role is. That's the whole purpose of having a Synod, is so that every congregation doesn't have to reinvent the wheel each time that this comes up. Because in truth, this comes up a lot. A lot might not feel like it to you as a lay person because of how long you're at a congregation. You might have grown up in a congregation all your life. And how many pastors will you've seen in that lifetime? Or how many youth directors will have come through in that lifetime? But it does happen a lot when there's 100-some congregations in our Synod. So when I say mobility, that's what I mean. And it doesn't necessarily just, mean pastors shuffling around in the Valley or shuffling around in the Bay Area or the Synod, but all rostered leaders are called to the whole church. So we have a whole community of rostered leaders in the ELCA and a whole community of full communion and dialogue partners, full communion partners, where clergy folk and deacons are also in partnership with our congregations. And maybe your congregation is one of those that has thought of some kind of creative arrangement like that, like sharing a clergy person with the Episcopal Church in town, or sharing an administrator with the Presbyterian Church in town, or doing a joint youth group between all the Protestant churches in town, something like that. What we want to do is help facilitate that collaboration and those relationships. I think that covers all of mobility, but I just, it's my first day, so give me a second to find out some more about what's possible.
Well, speaking of your first day, there's way more people who are excited about it. This one's one of my favorites.
Hey, Katie, what up? Katie is a great example.
That's not enough exclamation points.
I know, right? But Katie and Melva, both, I know them, and they're great examples of people who are leaders in congregations. And I don't know that we've always reached out to them as the Synod, or they've known that the Synod folk are here to help them and support them and connect them with other leaders in congregations who might be doing similar things. I'm sorry. I just know what Katie's been doing. Katie, I know, has focused on children's ministry in her church and talked about how can we be sensitive or attentive to the different sensory needs that children have in a worship service, which I know is something that a lot of congregations wonder about. We have fidgety children. We have children who can't keep quiet like adults do. Right. Which frankly is a blessing, because have you ever been in a super quiet worship service? To me, it's not that joyful all the time. There are times for quiet and contemplation, but there are times for making a joyful noise unto the Lord. And so how do we engage those people and their families in worship as well? And I know that there's probably a lot of people in other congregations whom Katie could connect with, and y'all could share your wisdom and information and best practices and maybe even failures with one another. So that, that's just a great example.
Well, you also have a lot of training for the thing that we don't like to talk about out loud a lot with other people and other congregations. You have a lot of training in how to help congregations who are in conflict or who just have disagreements or who pretend they don't have conflict. Will you speak a little bit about your skills in that?
Pretending we don't have conflict. This is the people that I come from. Minnesota nice, gone too far. But it's true. There is conflict. It just is. Conflict is inevitable. And in fact, if there isn't any conflict, it means that we're not trying to grow and change. Think about when you outgrow a pair of pants when you're a child. There's conflict between you and those pants at some point, but that's good because it indicates that there's growth happening. And conflict doesn't have to mean that communities fall apart. My hope is that even though it's uncomfortable, we can lean into it and address one another with grace and love while ironing out our differences and learning from one another. And I think that I'm eager to work with congregations to figure that out. So I've taken training with the Lombard Mennonite Peace Center and work with a couple congregations in our synod. And so I hope that we can help one another doing that. I know there's only a few trained conflict not managers, conflict consultants or something like that in our synod. Yeah, so I would hope that we can build up some of those resources amongst our people and help one another out. But I also know that sometimes it's hard to do that on top of the ministry you're primarily called to. So I'm open to ideas and hearing what people think about that. In fact, put it in the comments.
How do you feel about employee handbooks?
They're so necessary.
So necessary. If your congregation needs help with an employee handbook, we care about that. We want to help.
Here's your employee handbook thing. If you are married, how many of you got married without talking about what your marriage would be first? Like, I hope none of you, because that's super important. And I know many of the people I know who officiate at weddings require some kind of meeting beforehand for what we call premarital counseling, which sometimes is about setting up the ceremony, but also talks about, hey, let's be intentional. You're building a new family, you're forming a new home. So what do you want that to be like? And I think employee handbooks are that for businesses. And specifically in our case, for congregation ministries, employee handbooks are saying, hey, we're going to start a new family together. And how are we going to do that? And it's not just about protecting liability for the employer or something like that. Most of what's in an employee handbook makes sure that we treat our employees with equity and that we honor the gifts and the work that they will bring. If we want our employees to give their everything, which frankly in church we always do want our employees to give their everything at church, then we have to make sure that they're supported and sustained so that they can do that. I'm really excited that I think our employee handbook at the Synod hasn't been updated since the 80s. So, we've already started that. And I'm stoked that we're going to treat our employees at the Synod like we hope our employees and congregations will be treated.
Me too.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
I have a question for you. Are you ready for this one?
Oh, yeah.
It's from Pastor Hazel.
Oh, it's super long. Pastor Hazel.
I'll read it to you. Don't worry. It's exciting to think about new possibilities for mobility now, especially after having experienced worship online and in hybrid styles and physically distanced from our communities. What are some things you have learned in this pandemic that you feel you will use as you step into this new call?
Specifically related to worship.
I think it was related to mobility.
Yeah. What are some things that you've learned in this pandemic worship year? I think one of the things that I've learned is that our congregations are capable of more than they think they're capable of. And specifically when it comes to trying and doing new things. That's one. And so I want to constantly be reminding everyone of how much we've grown and adapted and experimented in this last year. And that doesn't have to just be a pandemic reality. Maybe we don't need to do it at the pace and intensity that we have over the last year. Obviously, that was a little traumatic, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to do it at all. We can. And I don't know about you, but there were very life-giving moments in this last year when we tried something new and it worked and it was amazing. And we were just excited that it worked and everyone was satisfied that we tried. I think the other thing that I've learned specifically with mobility is that those who are called to be leaders in our congregations, that the skills that we might have looked for before and the gifts that we might have looked for before are drastically different now. I think, I don't know about you, but I never wanted to become a pastor because I had this idea that you had to be quiet and serene and read a lot and write a lot. And there was a lot of alone time for some reason in my imagination of what a pastor did. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that we need leaders, pastors, deacons, and lay leaders all together who have the ability to connect with folks over multiple communication mediums. So the ability to text pastoral care to those who need to communicate by text, the ability to connect congregations and people across distances, because that might be where the resources are and where the gifts are coming from. And I think that we're looking for folks who are ready to help congregations live into a new church future. We're not in maintenance mode in the ELCA anymore, are we? That's not working anymore. And so if we're going to be a part of what God is doing in the world, then we need people who are interested in being a little bit more entrepreneurial than we've had to be, I think, in the last couple of decades. I think that's what I've learned. I'm excited to find folks who want to try new things, be a little bit entrepreneurial in ministry, and help congregations find that mission thing that they're about that's going to lead us into a life-giving future. I think so. I hope that answered your question, Hazel.
Well, I also think that you care deeply about wellness too, particularly of leaders and churches, and helping make sure people to take vacation time that they deserve, and honoring ways that they can care for themselves. And this is a question for me, because word on the grapevine is that van life is going to be your chosen mobility style. Do you want to talk to the Synod about what this new way of being mobile is for you?
Yeah, I want to first couch it in something I'm really proud of our Synod for doing, that at our last Synod Assembly, we passed a resolution that recommended in our guidelines that pastors receive, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so I'm really cautious to say them, but a particular number of weeks of paid parental leave and a particular number of weeks of paid bereavement leave, should they need it, or should that be a part of their life, their personal life. I love that, because I know so many rostered leaders that are called to be parents. And I personally don't get it, because OMG, that's so hard. That is so difficult to be a parent and a pastor all at the same time. But I know that when parents become pastors, it can be so amazing. I have some pastor friends in our Synod that are not only amazing parents, but their parenting leads them to be amazing pastors to their congregations, if they're given the space and the time to do that, to be both things at once, just like all of us are multiple things at once. Like, one of the things that I am, in addition to being a pastor, is a nomad at heart. Everybody go watch the movie Nomadland and you'll know what I mean. But I'm nomad at heart. I just always want to move. This call that I've been serving at CGS is the longest I've ever lived in one place. And I've had 3 different houses in 7 years. So it's not like I haven't moved around. But when I move around in the world and get to be in a different place every once in a while, every week if I can, it makes my heart flutter and it gives me energy. I love meeting new people. I love seeing new places. I love being in the wilderness. We just had to go to San Francisco today for one of our meetings, and I realized that I'm a little bit done with cities for a little while. I want to get out into the small towns and the wilderness a little bit more. So I have been yearning and longing to do as so many others have done, and move onto the road, become a little bit nomadic. My call did not allow me to do that, and I had no desire to leave the community that I was serving, and that was all in one place. But now that I have a call that is to such a wide geographical area, it seems like serendipity or something that I should be able to do this. So my hope, if you look up hashtag van life on any social media feed, you'll find these people who convert their vehicles. It could be a cargo van like the transit and sprinter vans that you see, or an ambulance, or some people convert box trucks or minivans or whatever it is. Some people do this out of financial necessity, and some people do it out of spiritual necessity or mental health necessity. And a lot of people just do it to explore. A lot of people have done it over the last few years. So it's gotten really popular, which of course makes it a lot harder to do. In a perfect world, I would have had a sabbatical this year, and I would have taken some of that time to convert a cargo van myself and build it out, build it into an RV. I love building things and making things. So I was doing a lot of research, had a whole architectural plan in my notebook and all the things picked out, and I was learning skills to do that. But with my new role in the Synod starting so soon after my last call to a congregation, and with the pandemic supply chain and the popularity of this and the lack of available resources for van life, I'm not able to do anymore. So I'm in the market for a van. If anybody knows of a van that's for sale, a converted van, has to have a shower inside and a cooking range and all of that, but it's totally possible. So I'm looking for that. My hope is that I'll live in it full time, and I will be able to use that travel ability to literally work out of your congregations. I literally want to park up in the parking lot of your church and stay with you for a week. I want to go to your council meetings and your book clubs and your Bible studies. I want to meet your people and worship with you, and hopefully spend time in your place. Now that we are all so used to Zoom, I think everyone's more prepared for me to have meetings online with those who are not, congregations and other places that I'm also working with. Our Synod staff meetings are on Zoom. Anything like that, I would love to be able to do that and really get to know the congregations of our Synod and all the people. My hope is that by doing that, I can know more folks so I can help us all connect more and share our gifts and our resources and do some more collaborative ministry stuff. And whenever I'm not working with congregations, I have a California State Park annual pass. So I'll stay in the state parks and go out on the BLM land, park up in whatever place is beautiful and lovely. So we just got to get a nice Wi-Fi booster to be able to do that. Hey, Fan, you're muted. Bishop Megan, you're muted. Thank you, Dominique.
You have lots of excitement about van life. A
Yay!
Couple of invitations to park in parking lots. But your next question comes from our house.
Oh, okay.
What gives you joy?
What a great question. One of the things that gives me joy is van life. The other thing that gives me joy is making things. Maybe you can see in my home office here, I have a lot of crafting stuff. I am that craft lady, and I have way more supplies than I can use, but painting, fiber arts, drawing, jewelry, what else? Felting lately, candle carving. I learned how to carve Pascal candles at one point. I love doing that. all of those things I really like to do, and they bring me a great deal of joy. And I have a gaggle of godchildren that I love dearly, and hanging out with them and playing with them and then letting them go home to their parents brings me great joy.
Follow-up question, who are your favorite godchildren?
That's not fair.
Yes, it is. They're right here on camera.
The other ones might be watching. I'm just saying. I don't have favorites. They're all my favorites in a different way. I have 5 favorite godchildren.
All right. Let the record reflect it was question and response. They're not quite the answer. All right, we have a good next question for you. Since our synod abounds with gifts of the Holy Spirit, might you speak to how you may survey us to learn of them?
100%. So glad you asked. I don't know yet is the real answer, but here's what I'm thinking. I know that our church has a database. I don't know how well our synod has a database. I don't know how well it's used, but I'm so grateful that at least the bones are there. So at some way I can organize all this information in our thoughts. But we all know church databases are only as good as the people who maintain them, right? So that's not a perfect solution. What I really hope to do is work with a couple of gifted people in our synod. I don't entirely know who those people might be yet, but to come up with a good list of metrics. And this is something I've been dreaming about for the past couple of weeks when I knew that I was coming into this position. But what are some good metrics for thriving congregations or for people who are thriving in their own ministry? And then how can we share those with one another? I think that there's some wisdom in the congregational vitality work that the ELCA has shared with us. And I also think that there's a lot of wisdom in our synod, just to hear what are the programs that you have at your church, or what are the ministries that you're doing, or what are the events that bring the most joy or activity into your community. And then I just want to start making a list of those kind of, right? And then from that, we can see maybe that's where it leads us. What is it? Benedictine discernment tells us that we need to have all the right things in place, the right time, the right people, the right resources. All of this makes for the Kairos time that a thing should happen. So I don't know what all that is, but that's what I hope to do. What I'm really excited about, and I know that I couldn't do this on myself, while I might be able to gather the information, I am so excited that we are going to have a full-time communications director on staff at the synod, because they are the ones who can help us communicate that. I am an over communicator because I think that's what people work is. People work is about saying things over and over and over again, knowing that we all have busy lives and we all need reminders, and to hear it 7 times before it really clicks in our brains and in our memories so that our hearts can get excited about it. And so to have a full-time communications director with whom I'm excited to figure out how we can communicate to all the congregations of our synod and help our congregations communicate to one another across our synod. So my hope and past experience has told me that if we can do that well, all of those gifts will get shared organically if we're communicating well to one another. I think that's what'll happen. I hope that's what'll happen, but really I'm all about the metrics, man. If we're gonna do something tangible, we got to have metrics and build on what's actually there instead of what we hope is there.
And my favorite thing about these live streams and about our synod is that every time we mention something that we have excitement and passion and joy for, someone in the comment section's like, I want to volunteer to do that. And that's exactly what is exciting for both of us, is to be able to be connectors kind of in this role. And so
Yes.
that's been very exciting during this conversation. Is the bishop's office staying in Sacramento?
Oh, no. Sorry, can I just say no? No. So right now, the bishop's office exists in 3 places, kind of. One is the office in Sacramento that you often see on the letterhead or on, send information here. The other place that it currently exists is at my former congregation in San Jose, California, at Christ the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. That's where some of the Burlingame stuff came to. And where some of, I know Lori Gomer, the staff person, was working out of there, but I think some others. And then there's also the Synod Resource Center in Fresno, What we know for sure is that our lease in San Jose ends at the end of July, and then our lease in Sacramento ends at the end of September. The Sacramento lease is ending because that is a building that belongs to the Presbytery out in Sacramento, and they are choosing to sell the building, so we were going to have to leave anyway. And our lease in July with CGS in San Jose is ending because we always knew that would be temporary. That was more of a where do we put stuff while we move. What I do know is that we looked at a new site today, and so we're starting to draw up leases and drafts for that in hopes to move the synod offices into a congregational space. I know that there's lots of congregations who have physical space in their facilities in our synod. And I have seen in multiple synod profiles throughout the years that there is excitement about the synod offices being located in a congregational space, which I think is a great idea. How amazing to put that resource and that gift to good use for our ministry that is shared between us. We're looking for a space that is close to an airport for all of our travel that the synod staff and that our visitors will have to do. We're looking for a space that is accessible to others, so by major roads and highways, and a space that can have high-speed internet brought to it so that we can have connection even when we're not in person. A space where we could do things like live streams for worship or meetings like this or events like this, because we all know that our bishop is social media savvy and will be doing a lot of that. What the space doesn't need is a bunch of individual, personalized, exclusive offices. Most of our staff will be working remotely, like me in a van on the road, sure, but other people out of their homes all over. And so our office space is a communal meeting space for the most part. Sure, it'll be a place where we can receive mail, but everything else that we can make mobile and remote and flexible, we will. The whole idea is for us to be flexible, to go where the congregations and the people are, and only have a gathering space for things when we need it, which it turns out we've learned in the pandemic isn't as much as we thought. I guess we need a place to put a big copier. That would be essential, right? But hopefully we'll have a new space housed in a congregation of the synod before the end of September. Otherwise, we might be homeless and the whole office will be in a van for a little while. Just kidding.
Well, one thing that a lot of people might not know is that the synod just has a lot of confidential paperwork. And so having a building that can be secure and locked up and used by other people, but not so much that the confidential paperwork is kind of near places where that's not safe and healthy is really important. A lot of the reason we have so much confidential paperwork is we do something called candidacy. Would you be willing to explain what candidacy is? And you've served on the candidacy committee before, like maybe what that committee does?
Yeah, I've been serving on the candidacy committee for a while now. I don't know how long. I lost track of the time. But that committee is a group of lay folk and rostered folk in our synod who are the embodiment of the church, the whole church, our synod in particular, in a mutual discernment process that we call candidacy. Candidacy is a mutual discernment of this inner call that individuals hear to rostered ministry and an external call that the church hears and affirms in that individual to rostered ministry. So for those who are considering becoming a deacon or a pastor of the ELCA, they enter into the process that we call candidacy. This process is kind of like the overarching name that we give it all, but alongside it or parallel or a part of it are things like seminary and internship and ministry in context. What do they call those in the real world? Practicums or internships, stuff like that. And a lot of discernment. There's this whole process that we go through of entrance and endorsement and approval, all these milestones that we hit. There's one-on-one relator relationships. And these processes can last anywhere from, 3 to 15 years for an individual. It's really, really personalized. Everyone can take the time that they need. Some people take longer, some people go slower. And then there's all kinds of expressions of that. It's just different for each person. And a part of that is the TEAM program. I don't even know what TEAM stands for, but it's spelled TEEM, because we like our acronyms. Anybody know what TEAM stands for? Put it in the comments. Thanks. It's 7 o'clock. Anyway, so that program is a program where we lift up lay leaders and congregations that are looking for pastors. It's one of the ways that we make it more accessible for people of color, people in rural places or places that have difficulty with economic development, all for those people who normally wouldn't have access to the theological education for emerging ministries. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, bud. Anyway, so all these emerging ministry places where people might not have access to the typical routes through seminary and candidacy that others would take. I'm really excited that our candidacy committee, in partnership with our synod and another synod of the ELCA, put together and fundraised, and in partnership with PLTS, the seminary, fundraised enough money for one of our candidates who is a person of color and who identifies as queer to have an internship that's going to prepare her for being who she is as a leader in the ELCA, instead of whom, I don't know, the rubrics would want her to be, which might not be who she authentically is. And frankly, I think that this candidate is authentically going to be a gift to the church. So I'm excited that our candidacy committee is seeking God's call and walking with people to find their voices and their calls in our church. It's going to be so exciting. Wait, was that what we were talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of calls, would you be willing to share a little bit of your kind of faith journey?
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Jesus. Talk about how you love Jesus. Jesus. Yeah.
I love Jesus. You know who I identify with more, though, is the Holy Spirit. I don't know if you've seen this, but one of the images that is often used for the Holy Spirit is a goose. I prefer the Canada Goose version of it. But if you've ever met a goose, as I did when I was a little girl, my grandma would take me to one of the parks in Minneapolis, and we go feed the geese by one of the many, many lakes in the city. And one of the geese when I was little bit my hand, jerk goose. I was so scared at the time. But being a kid who grew up in the outdoors and with animals all around and with adults who valued knowing about the animals and the plants and everything around me, the geese always struck me as this strange thing because they were so common, right? They were in city parks and in ditches of highways, but they were also out in the wild. And they have all this power in their bodies and in their wings. If you've ever seen them land or take off from water, they're huge and amazing. And they travel these huge distances across the globe to be a part of the changing seasons and the creation around them. And it always seems like you don't know where they're going to go, and you don't know which one you're looking at. You could be watching one goose and following it around, and all of a sudden you get it mixed up for another goose. And they're powerful and unpredictable and ornery and lovely. And this is how I've experienced God working in my life most of all. God is powerful, makes me a little ornery sometimes. I think likes to push me beyond my boundaries, and is the thing that also sustains me, like the wind, right? This is how I've experienced God most powerfully in my life. I grew up with this image of God that was pretty simple. That was companion and redeemer, and over my life has grown more complex to be this thing that sometimes I don't know if I can trust or get behind. And it's so big and it's such a mystery to try to understand and define the divine, that finding where I fit into the divine or where the divine is present in me gets a little scary and difficult. because it's too much sometimes. At the same time, I identify as an Enneagram 8, if that is anybody's language. And it's really good to know that I don't have to be in control and I don't have to solve everything or reconcile everything or make everything just, because in the end, all I have to do is get into God's current, because God is already doing this in the world. And now I just really want to be a part of it. I just want to be a part of what God's doing in the world. Is that enough of my faith story? Does that tell you what you want to know? I hope so. I hope you'll ask me questions if you don't know, or if you want to know other things.
We do have a question.
Oh, yes.
Would you be willing to speak to the importance of the Synod Council and that of our discipling teams?
I think Synod Council is super important. Just like any council at a congregation is super important. We have congregations that are led by one person who may or may not be around for the entirety of the life of that congregation, and we do a disservice to the communities that we serve and the communities that we are. But a council, like the disciples, right? They had apostles. They appointed people to different parts of ministry according to their gifts, and that's what councils do. Councils are those appointed to lead and vision and to collaborate and organize everyone. For that reason, I think Synod councils are the same. I'm learning as I'm coming into this role that not all things congregational are transferable to a synod structure, right? It's not a one-to-one comparison. However, I think our Synod Council is very instrumental in knowing who we are as a synod and finding a vision for who we're going to be in God's work. I'm coming to learn more about how the council operates. The awkward part was I was elected to council at our last assembly, so I've been to one Synod Council meeting and I had to resign right after because they voted to call me. So I don't know how many council meetings I'll go to in the future, but I do know that I'll be working with them to do a lot of these things that I hope for around our synod. It's going to be their knowledge of who's in their conference, what are the ministries going on that I should connect with, how can they help a congregation in transition in addition to me, because I can't do it all myself. It takes a village to help one another, right? We're all interdependent. And perhaps some of this work can be done through the discipling teams, but I'm not entirely sure. I think that a committee and any body is only as useful as its work. And so if we have people who are excited to do that work, or if we have purpose and vision and the resources and people to execute it, then committees are great. But if we have committees that exist because it's in our policies or in our constitution, and frankly, I'd love it if we just dive into that constitution and those policies and we revise them and reform them to what the Holy Spirit is doing among us now and who we are now, instead of who we thought we were going to be 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even 3 years ago. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, and you also have a bit of experience with our Synod youth and serving at Mount Cross. Would you be willing to talk about young people in our Synod and some of the ways that their leadership happening now and existing now is an important part of our Synod?
Yeah. I'm wondering if I can out Catherine in this, but I think I will. So when I first got assigned to Sierra Pacific Synod, it was in 2009, and I think there were 4 congregations seeking pastors at the time, maybe 6. So I knew I wanted to be out here to interview, but finding a job and renting an apartment isn't that easy in California, especially during a recession. So I called up Mount Cross and I said, hey, do you need any help? I need a place to stay while I interview. And it just happened that they needed somebody to run their kitchen. And I had done that before, worked in restaurant kitchens and knew how to do a lot of that. So I worked in Mount Cross's kitchen for a year. It was really fun to meet most of the people in the Synod that first year by serving them food in the kitchen. But I also got to know a lot of the summer staff and a lot of the youth leaders and young adults that way as well. that's how I met up with Spizik, who has their retreats at Mount Cross. So when I received my first call, I contacted the adult assistants of Spizik and I said, hey, how can I help? I really love your group. I thought it was so cool. I'd only ever seen that model of youth ministry once before when I was in Seattle, and they had Lions, which is the amalgamation of youth groups across congregations. And I think it's so good. I think it's such a great idea. I know in my last congregation, I had a handful of youth, maybe if that. And as you all know, youth are very busy because they're all exploring and testing out new identities and things that they like and hobbies and all of that. So they're always busy, right? And doing all these great things if they're able. So to have a way for them to connect with a lot of Lutheran youth or people of faith and build up some community that way and do some faith formation and spiritual exploration with each other, I think is really great. So I was lucky enough to serve with Spizik, I don't know, for a crazy long time. In that time, help them rewrite their constitution because, you know, that's what I do. Built the website for Spizik and a couple other, you know, I like the administrative stuff. So I lent my gifts and my skills where they were needed. And in that time, one of the youth that came through Spizik was Catherine Slaybaugh, who is our new communications director. So I knew Catherine when she was a youth person, and I watched her go off to CLU, and I was so excited when she decided to major in marketing and communications. I thought, yes, this is exactly what the church needs. Because she was so amazing as a youth person. I remember one Synod assembly, with the help of the adults on the team, who I think Bishop Megan, you were on the team at that time as well, she was able to make an amendment to a resolution. And it was awesome. She was so brave for doing that. I know so many adults in our congregation who don't have the chutzpah to stand up and make an amendment to a resolution, even though it's so necessary. I get it, it's scary, but Catherine did it. And I was so grateful for her leadership at that time that I couldn't wait to see what she could do in the rest of her life. And I'm so delighted that now she's agreed to come back to our Synod as an adult and bring the gifts and the skills that she's learned since her time on Spizik with her. And I think that she'll be a great addition to the staff. I think youth ministry is so hard. I know so many great youth ministers and directors in our Synod. And it's not as many as, you know, I grew up with in Minnesota, where every church seemed to have a huge youth group. But I also don't know that that kind of large church programmatic youth ministry is good for every community. I mean, it doesn't work unless you have this huge adult committee and workforce, and you can afford to pay a full-time youth director. That's just not in the cards for a lot of our congregations and our ministries. And yet that doesn't mean that we have to do away with youth ministry or that youth can't be a part of our congregations. I know as a youth, I served on my church council. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was included. I was included in a visioning process and a mission process. And those were the things that instilled in me that I was valuable to the church then, and I would be valuable to the church in the future, that God could work through me no matter who I was. And I think that's an important thing for us to model in our congregations, that if youth are valued for who they are, then surely you are valued for who you are, no matter your age or your physical ability or your mental health or your socioeconomic status or your gender identity or sexual orientation or your ethnicity or whatever. You know, like if we can model that all people are a part of the body of Christ and valued and celebrated members for who they are right now, and I think that that does a lot for many of our ministries. I feel like I rambled on that one into the preacher thing where I talked about all the things, even though it was just about a specific question.
You got to be you. You were talking about appreciating people for being the fullness of who they are. And so I'm appreciating you for being the fullness of who you are in this space. One thing that folk might not know is that this is your first day of employment with the Synod. However, over the last month or so, maybe it's a little bit longer than a month, you have been doing an extraordinary amount of work on an installation that is to come. And today we just posted the website where people can RSVP. Do you want to say a little bit about the installation and what people should know about that?
Ooh, we did post that one, did we? That went live? Whoops. Let's take that down for a second. Because so what we do know is that the installation was scheduled to be at St. Matthew's in Walnut Creek. However, when Bishop Megan was elected and we started talking about the installation, it became really clear that because this was going to be such a historic event, an historic event, in talking with the pastor at that congregation, who had experience with Bishop Guy Irwin's installation, we determined that this neighborhood congregation might not be the best location for this event. We hope and are expecting a lot of people to come celebrate with us. So we've moved the event to Grace Cathedral in downtown San Francisco. San Francisco has many benefits, not only including a space that hopefully is large enough for all of us to come, but also being in a city that knows Bishop Megan and that Bishop Megan knows. And so we have lots of support in the police department and the civic leaders and the community groups and all of that, in addition to all of the support and enthusiasm that we're getting from people in our congregations and ministries in the Sierra Pacific Synod. So I'm really excited that we're not just having an installation, but we're going to have this weekend of events. We're going to start on Friday. We've not contracted, but we have someone helping us named Reverend Nicole Garcia, who is a pastor of the ELCA, and she's going to help us hold listening sessions on Friday afternoon before the installation, probably at one of our congregations in the city. She's going to help us put together a panel of people who are all trans voices of leadership in the ELCA, whether they be clergy, deacon, or lay leaders, and give us an opportunity to know that Bishop Megan, while we love them very much, is not the only trans person who is a gifted leader in our church, and that there are a lot of other gifted leaders who can help us understand what it's like to be a trans person leading in the ELCA. We hope that everybody will come to that listening session, and then that gives us the opportunity to have dinners and receptions and parties all Friday night before we have an installation worship the next day. So ELM and Reconciling Works and all of our partners and a lot of congregations. We have a lot of people coming in from out of town, bishops and visitors and presidents of places like seminaries, all that stuff. So presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton is going to be with us, obviously, to do the installation and to preach. So we're going to have all those parties on Friday night. And then one of the things we inherited from the schedule was that this installation was scheduled for September 11th, and that happens to be the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So we want to honor that day. So we'll be partnering with the SFPD and the SFFD. And one of our military chaplain pastors in our synod, Pastor Jason Benzie, will be helping us to put together an interfaith memorial for the morning of Saturday, the 11th of September. So at the chapel, just before we worship, we'll have an interfaith memorial for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And then that morning, there's lots of rehearsals and getting ready, and a press conference will happen just before worship. And then worship will be at 2 p.m. Our doors will open at 1:30. We're negotiating to have a block of hotel rooms in the city so everybody can come in from out of town and be with us, make a weekend of it. I think would be really fun. We'll be the first major event in San Francisco since the pandemic. There aren't any conferences or anything or conventions scheduled until after us. So hopefully the city will still be coming to life and we can take advantage of that. The one thing that we're still doing is that we're so blessed to be hosted by Grace Cathedral. Bishop Andrus and the staff at the cathedral have been amazing so far. But like our congregations, their congregation is slowly opening and adjusting to new COVID realities every month. And so right now, we're not at full capacity in the cathedral. So we know that this will be a ticketed event because there is limited space. Just like in every congregation almost, we want to be socially distant and safe. We'll all have to wear masks for the time being. So we need to have ticketed events. So hopefully that's what's on the website. The website will have updated information. I know you can find the link to that on our website, which right now you can find at spselca.net. I know usually it's spselca.org, but just give us a minute. We're adjusting, and go to spselca.net. And then you can find our little pop-up website for the installation and start to get your tickets. But we will be sending out invitations and more information to your congregations no later than August, so that you can know how to come, when to come, where to park, how to drive, trains, buses, automobiles, all of that stuff. We have a really great team of people who are working to put on this installation, and they are thinking about every angle. And it is so much. It is so big and so much. And I'm really, really grateful that they're all lending their gifts and volunteering for this, as we all are. Oh, I got tired talking about that. That's a lot.
It is a lot, and we've neared the end of our hour, but I want to give you the opportunity to say anything else you want to add. Yeah,
I just saw Cindy asking if the installation will be on YouTube, and yes, in addition to this lovely in-person event, we will 100% fully live stream this installation worship service. So if you don't want to come to the city or aren't able to come to the city or be in person, or if you're from far away, you're absolutely going to be able to participate with us online. Sorry. That's a really great question. That's so essential to say.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe you'll read about it in all of the media too. Because if we can get an opportunity to say the word Jesus as much as possible, we're going to do it loud and proud in as many places as we can, and also say the word Lutheran in hopes that folk want to come pray with y'all.
I heard that if you were on the Fab Fives show, they're going to come to your show, right? Like, so they're probably going to come and show up. That might be a reason. Bring your autograph book for both the bishop and no.
I can tell you, I can't say anything about the Fab Five. Sorry, guys. There'll be a lot of things that are confidential during the time that I'm the bishop, and that will be one of them. But Noah Hepler, Pastor Noah Hepler will be joining us, and I believe former Bishop Guy Irwin will be joining us. So you'll at least get the Fab Three of us.
Nice. Oh, that'll be cool. Either way, it's going to be an awesome party. And Bishop Brenda Boss down in Southwest California Synod gets ordained the next day. So don't worry, we'll end early enough for everybody to catch a plane and go down to Southern California and celebrate Bishop Brenda's installation as well. It'll be, I'm super excited for that weekend. And then we all plan to take 2 weeks off after, right? Just kidding.
Submit your vacation form per the new employee handbook you talked about, I guess. Right. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, or our fine live stream following folk didn't ask you, that you would just like to share with us?
No. Y'all, I can't even think right now of what to share. I want to share everything. I want to know everything. Please, please, please reach out to me. My email is Manda. I know it sounds like Amanda. Just leave off the first A and spell Manda at spselca.org. Manda at spselca.org. Please, please, please email me with your ideas, what you want to do. Tell me where your congregation is and when I can come visit. Hopefully I'll have a van by the installation. So give me a couple months to get that van. Then I want to come stay where you are and hang out with you all and meet you. I think it's going to be super fun.
Thank you, Assistant to the Bishop.
Thank you, Bishop Megan.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone who is watching. Take care. We'll see you.
Have a good night.
Time.